Hello, this is the OSCE Days. Hello, Stockholm.
Hey, Stockholm.
Hello. This is the OSCE Days 2015, the Open Source Circular Economy Days. And this is the interview with Stockholm. My name is Lars.
My name is Anna. Oh, jag heter Runa. My name is Runa.
This is Runa. We are here in Berlin and we are interviewing Johnny and a lot of other community members of the OSCE Days in Stockholm. Hey, how are you?
We're fine. We're in the middle of processing the fictive society.
Okay.
If you want to know more about it and have prepared questions, we'll try to answer them. So.
What has been going on until now, so far?
Okay, let's show us what you are doing there. Okay.
Can you see this?
Yes.
I can see. The map?
Yeah.
Now we don't see the map anymore.
Okay, tell us, what have you saw? What's going on at your venue?
Yeah. At the wall of the OSCE Days, our city, we pretty much posted the challenge we were to execute. We started yesterday, we continued today, and today we have mainly focused on the place and a place in time and the prerequisites. How does the production look? The energy resources, waste management, how much of the society is open source hardware based, is coexisting with proprietary production, for example. We've gone into detail about energy.
Sorry.
So when you're talking about a society, you're talking about a society that is going to be in the future?
Yes, this is a fictive place.
Yes. Maybe you can explain this shortly to people who are watching you and who didn't read about the Stockholm project yet.
And can you turn the camera a little bit? We can't see you, Johnny.
Okay.
Now it's better. Cool. Okay, please go on.
We have our documentary person, Xenia, here. She will talk.
Well, basically, I just wanted to summarize. I mean, what we did today, we just started to sort of build a utopian city. We agreed that it's going to be 20,000 people and try to play around with existing technology like green energy and so on. And we had a guy who is an engineer. Unfortunately, he had to leave, and he helped us to calculate stuff. For instance, we realized that we can't just like do everything as some people describe, like, okay, we just run on this energy, the green energy and whatever. So he helped us to calculate actually how much stuff we need. For instance, we can't be completely off-grid and so on. So it wasn't completely utopian. And just when you called in, we started to talk about dystopian society when, we've been talking about a game as well, because what we've been doing, we just sort of been playing sort of a fake game, which is not a computer game, but we had a little board and so on, and trying to figure out how the society will work. And so now we were just in the middle of discussing dystopia and thinking that the game to play would be nice is to start as a dystopian society and maybe try to fix it with some things, so it would be a bit less cheesy. Otherwise, we mainly covered production and waste management. We spoke a bit about the fact that actually politics and sort of society and decision-making structure is extremely important, but we're quite realistic about just having a few hours to talk about it. So I started to write it in a wiki, and hopefully we're going to continue our collaboration in the future using this wiki, and we're going to share it on the forum as well. Am I talking too much? No?
You are a documentarian.
Yeah.
Not at all talking too much. Can you show, is there also a connection to what you were explaining now on the map? Did you also implement this on the map?
The decision making, no, but yeah, I mean, what I can tell about the map, what I think we were trying to do here is, thanks. Basically, what we did here is basically we tried to create a city which is which is almost like a federated network, a bit like the diaspora pods look like. So we don't have a central city, we just have a city with like many centers and roads between them. We have some waste management facility which is downstream, so all the shit comes in, so we don't have to pump it. And then we mix the farmland and parks because, well, we just want to make everything practical and so on. But I mean, this looks kind of utopian. I think what is interesting is we run into some problems and that usually sort of, I mean, which are just realistic. For instance, we can't be off the grid. We can't make our own fiberglass to build all this fancy solar and windmills. But then again, we decided then each city center in this sort of decentralized neo-feudalist state going to have a makerspace, and this is number 2. So we have makerspaces, so we can make some sort of stuff. Yeah, but not all of it. Then we have a port, and but there was some criticism from our own group of it being too utopian or maybe a bit too isolated and sort of not realistic. So yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit where in your utopia comes the open source part in? Is when you bring open source to the table, does it change the dynamics in your city and your future, the future you're talking about?
What we decided was to not think too many years ahead, and this society is partly proprietarian and partly open source. So in some branches there are more proprietarian enterprises, and in others there are more open source ones, so we can kind of compare. But we haven't come that far yet in imagining how the consequences could be. We can assume that they will be, and that is actually, from my point at least, what I'm maybe most interested in, and also seeing how the relations producer and consumers change when a society becomes more and more open source when in production.
Can I add to it? I think yesterday we ran into a problem when we started talking about open source, is that open source is more like on a scale, and maybe when we start talking about in this sort of utopian paradigm, we just think of open source and proprietary or closed source or whatever. But if we really dig into it, we can see some open source stuff, and then some of the elements of the stuff are not open source, and so on. So you can't really think of it as a purely, oh, let's just do this open source and so on. I mean, if you talk about software, it's pretty easy. There is open source code you can change and so on. But when it comes down to hardware, I mean, someone mentioned yesterday the Open Source Hardware Association, and it's actually, I think there is a problem, which is a sort of a challenge that we can't solve here, is the challenge of is the problem of standards. It's like, what is open source? And I don't want to get too philosophical, but I think it's super important to actually open this discussion and hopefully continue it. Is like, before we just start talking about open source as some sort of a new answer to everything, it's really important to actually understand what it is and what we can apply it to, and what are the consequences of it and what is needed.
What do you think is open source, and where do you see it's unclear what it is?
Well, to me, open source is just something that I can change.
Okay.
As much as I can. It's basically, I don't know, I think we discussed it yesterday, and some people have maybe deeper insights.
Because I asked this because we had a similar discussion here yesterday, and we agreed on the answer that open source is something really clear because we have definitions for it. And for example, the definition for open source hardware, which can be found at the pages of the Open Source Hardware Association, say open source hardware is hardware whose design is made publicly available so that everyone can study, change, modify, distribute, make and sell the hardware or design of that hardware, someone line. And I think we thought that it's somehow the strength of open source, that it's not this vague term, but it's really has a precise a definition which somehow lays out a roadmap of that says what to do and what not to do, what is open source and what is not open source. But I totally agree that it's really unclear what happens if more and more people start to follow that path.
No, what I was trying to say is if I build a robot and some of the components have plans and designs and so on, some of the components end up proprietary, how do I license my robot?
Yes, that's a huge problem, the licensing part, yes.
Yeah, so and I think you can apply it to anything, I mean, in like open source hardware. And then, for instance, if there is a material, because more and more we mentioned like graphene, for instance, today. More and more we try to use like all these smart materials and so on. And if I use one of these materials in my open source piece of hardware, then how do I license my piece of hardware if it includes some materials which are proprietary, or the hardware to produce these materials is proprietary, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's a huge sort of philosophical discussion, and a lot of work can be done in this.
Yeah, you're touching some of the critical issues of open source hardware, and I've seen in our forums that some people provided some resources about that. The question of licensing is not trivial and all that, yeah.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to go there. I think there are answers in the forum.
Yeah. In terms of very clear, understandable work of visions from us, we can say we just touched the subject and run into, and we'll end up with a lot of more questions than we started with. So, and we haven't like had time to explore all the threads we started, you know. The only thing we agreed on here is waste or the effects of our activities in this place that produces any form of result that we need to take care of is done by the community, and the hardware for that we agreed on we can do open source. So the waste company, so to speak, is open source. And the hardware, the piping, the tanks, everything. That's the only thing we really agreed on. And then we gotten into all the interesting bigger perspectives like decision-making, monetary system,
allocation system,
income. Yeah, so we are debating these questions, but they all have different elements that aren't clearly open source related. So we just empty the subjects, and we have very different perspectives here. So we have people coming in today that had a lot of interesting questions. I think your notion was really interesting. Maybe you can say something about the physical possibilities of even creating this fictive town.
Which aspects of it are you?
Yeah, you said that this isn't going to happen. But if there were, there's 20,000 people living here, and we discussed it from that perspective. But she said that there won't be a kind of town like this, and she's right actually. But there is 20,000 people you can find that have the same interests in this. You can find them and coordinate. Yeah.
But they won't live in the same town.
No, they will be spread. So a lot of talk, a lot of interesting ideas, and it's being documented. So you're not missing out on anything of this interesting stuff that has been said, because Xenia here, she's documented everything, and we will load it up in the forum folder you provided.
That's perfect. We're very much looking forward to see the documentation and read about it.
Yeah, and all the concerns.
Are you going to continue working on this? Although it's never going to happen.
Yeah, we have an end point. Like today, it's officially 6 p.m. But it seems like some of the people here, we will continue to, as well as you, work together. Yes, yeah.
And
This game design seems to have some element of substance to it, actually. A simulation of this, yes. And there's people that can do that here, yeah.
Yeah, so sorry, I just popped out. I think the summary to our gathering today would be that the process of like prototyping and simulation with a lot of participants will be really, I mean, it's utopian to think that you can build anything in 2 days or even find any answers, but to look for processes which enable more people and incentivize more people to join the prototyping process and thinking process about different open source ways of production, democracy, and what have you. That's sort of something which we found quite promising and feasible as well.
I would like to add a little bit to your discussion, just to share my perspective on all of this. I call myself an open source economist, but I would never talk about an open source economy or something like that, or I would never spread the vision of a world where everything is open source. I don't think that for me there's much fruitful things to find in this approach. My approach is to look at real examples, real cases, not to ask how can someone make money with it or how can make people money with it, but to ask how can this specific maker, this specific company or whatever make money with it, or how to open source that specific machine or technique, and never really engage in this big picture. Because I think from the place where we are today, it's not imaginable how this will look like, and that we will end up inventing this in these little steps. So that's my interest in the little steps. Just want to share that perspective. Maybe you can also dive into a little bit into the little steps in your discussion.
It sounds to me like the same idea as all the left movements and environment movements have, step by step, and no visions and no ideas of how to transition into something else.
Oh, we're having an argument here.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
And I think it's a problem to gather people around something if you don't have some kind of idea of where you're going.
You're probably right. So the OSCE days need a long-term vision and utopia.
Also, Lars, I want to say on Open Source Hardware Association forum, they just posted and want our help. Shall we have a license type of what is open source? And they're going to do a poll now. You saw that?
Not yet.
It's like Creative Commons. Yeah, so we can help with that by contributing what we think of that. So apart from the definitions, shall we have a license system? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. The license part is really, really important and key to growth for the whole movement of open source.
Yes, so for people looking at this video, go to OSCEdays15.com and contribute.
Yeah, cool. So do you have a question to ask to them? Yeah. Do you have something more that you want to share with us, or maybe some final words of wisdom or a message you want to send out to the OSCE Days community, or maybe you want to mention another place where others can connect to you, find resources, questions you share, anything?
Yeah. Our page on the OSCE Days 2015 have links to the people arranging this, so you can reach us there. Yeah.
We're quite curious of where the LEDA concept that South Africa, Cape Town is working with as this VoIC idea. That's really inspiring, I think.
Yeah, I think too. You should really have a look at this everything around Larry Chang and Gian. They have some really pretty interesting ideas that are connected to a long-term vision, but also have ties to the real world today.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Okay, say bye.
Yeah. So it was very nice talking to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think we'll have a lot to learn from what you did over there in Stockholm.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah. Bye.
And good luck with the discussion.
Thanks for joining, and see you all soon. Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.